Hi all, welcome to my story. I've got Tom Howard here today. Tom, you all right?
I'm all right, Cavs. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Tom, just hoping that you can pass on, obviously, your story, your experiences from when you first started football and obviously through the academy and we'll get to some tastier stuff later on. So, yeah, mate, just sort of first of all, obviously you're at Chelsea as a youngster and you're coaching there now.
Yeah.
How did you get into Chelsea? Where was you playing beforehand? How did you get picked up, sort of thing?
Yeah. So it was a long time ago now. I think I was only 7 at the time. I was just playing locally with a team that a local coach had set up in, I think we were called Hanworth United at the time, but just in around the Staines area. And I think it was only one of my second or third games playing as an under-8.
Is that grassroots?
Local Chelsea's. Yeah, grassroots, mate, yeah. Came down to one of our games and just invited me down to a Chelsea session. There was loads of boys there when I first went. And to begin with, they invited me back to another few sessions, and I was carrying on playing with my grassroots team for the entire under-8 season. And Chelsea were not going to offer me a deal to begin with. They already had I think 10 to 12 players that they'd already signed. And no one else had really approached me at the time. And then I played in a cup final towards the end of that season. And an Arsenal scout, I think, approached my dad at the time, and sounds like that forced Chelsea's hand a little bit to try and take me on.
This sort of competition.
Yeah, and being an Arsenal fan, obviously as a kid, was a bit of a difficult decision for me to make. But Chelsea was obviously a lot more local, and put a lot more less pressure, on my mum and dad to ferry me all the way up to North London 4 times a week. So I took the opportunity to join Chelsea, and then joined there as an under-9 in their earliest age group. The experiences that I then went on to have throughout the academy years were fantastic, really, Cavs. And
So just from that, mate, obviously you touched on obviously Chelsea in terms of easier for your family and stuff.
Yeah.
So what was the support like from like your parents and from friends?
Yeah, unbelievable. To be honest, Cavs, really fortunate to have a mum, dad, and younger brother that were incredibly supportive all the way through. Never once did I miss a training session or a game through not being able to get there, which you probably only appreciate at this stage now in your life, where you're an adult and you understand all the different sacrifices that you've got to make to enable that to happen. Incredibly fortunate, and friends as well. A lot of my close friends that I have now have come from that period in my life, and were, as I said again, really supportive of that process, and probably helped me even more when that came to an end, more than anything else. I always say to everyone how fortunate I am to have an incredible support network.
Yeah, because obviously like we both know, and when you're in the academies, there's a lot of travelling and a lot of commitment, and obviously we're at that young age, which you were, the commitment really come from your parents. So yeah, it does take its toll. So yeah, mate, carry on. Obviously you got signed by Chelsea, and then you carried on for a number of years.
Yeah, I think it was a total of 11 years in the end, joining at around 8 and then leaving at the end of my scholarship. But yeah, my experiences there were unbelievable. I was able to travel the world to all different places, and fortunate enough to play with some incredible players that were a lot better than me. But yeah, throughout my younger years, always thoroughly enjoyed going, which was a major part. And I suppose a big part of that might have been down to that I was having a fair amount of success still at the academy level, and was playing well and able to progress relatively carefree until I was about 14. And then probably some more difficult periods in terms of growth spurts and all the things that naturally happen with your body. But still, the experience I had was great. and then I suppose moving into the full-time scholarship years, were again I was able to play a fair amount of football, and really enjoyed doing so. As I said, able to play with some fantastic players now that are playing in the Premier League and then down the system as well. So yeah, the experience was great, and I think my time came to an end at about the time where I'd maxed myself out, really, Cavs, to be honest, for a number of different reasons. But
And what, just obviously on that academy setup,
yeah.
so from the transition from obviously only training on a Tuesday and Thursday, Saturday, and then playing Sundays, and then going obviously as a young scholar, and being full time, what sort of did that look like day to day for you?
Yeah, it was a big change, and for someone at the time that was probably still getting used to their body a little bit as well, it probably took me a bit more of time to adapt to, especially the physical elements of that. So we'd have a pretty set structure each week, with the youth team. So we train on a Monday, usually be a fairly light session after the game on the Saturday, and then Tuesday and Wednesdays would be our working days, I suppose you'd call them. So training intensity would be pretty high. Sessions would tend to last a little bit longer, and you'd often have sessions in the afternoon, whether that was individual work or gym-based work. Thursday would again be a fairly long training session, but the intensity on your legs would probably come down a little bit. Maybe a little bit more shape work, preparing for the game Saturday. And then Friday would be very much low key, maybe some small sided games towards the end, leading into Saturday. But again, a lot of shape work, set piece work, leading into the games on Saturday. And we had a fairly set structure each week. I think now it's definitely a lot more variable. They have games midweek, weekends, but we were fairly set in that structure most weeks, which enabled me the opportunity to get used to it. But yeah, that's what a typical week looked like, mate.
And obviously you said about obviously when you got to the end of your time at Chelsea, just sort of touching on that and what challenges you had, because you said obviously some challenges you had to overcome, and you felt like you had got to the end of your time there, obviously by being let go, but also you felt that for yourself as well. Just sort of what challenges were there for you, and what did you have to overcome?
I think for me, I certainly overcome the more physical challenges when I was probably 14, 15, 16, and was able to then grow into my body, and had a fairly successful first year as a scholar. Played in most league games, and was in and around Youth Cup squads, which was, for me, the season before, I saw as a big success. I think the challenges really were just being able to replicate some of the success I was having in training. I was training pretty well most sessions, was trying to then recreate that in games and do that consistently. And I definitely struggled with that in my second year, probably because the pressure of, and this wasn't put on me externally, it was probably more myself, of knowing that a decision was probably coming a lot sooner than it was the previous year. And just always been the first to admit, I just wasn't able to then perform in a manner that would have enabled me to get a professional contract at the end of the 2 years. I think the psychological side of stuff probably had an impact on that. As I said, the pressure I was putting on myself, I wasn't then able to really perform in a way that I thought I was probably capable of at times. But yeah, I think that's just the nature of football, Cavs, and some people are prepared or enable themselves to do that more successfully than I was able to at the time. And that you look back now in hindsight when we're a lot older, and you think I would have done this differently, and that's really easy to do. But I don't look upon it with any regrets. I was an 18-year-old kid that was just trying to do his best at the time. And as I said, just the first to admit that those challenges have been able to recreate every game, really, that consistent level, I just wasn't able to do.
And what you obviously just touched on in terms of you not reaching the heights of some of the others at that time of your career, and obviously at that age. And would you, looking back now, obviously I'm glad you said you have no regrets, because that's something that I don't think anyone should have And obviously you learn from each experience and each
Yeah.
scenario you're put in each environment. I was similar to you. I got released at just a year before you did, and it does mentally play up, and you look back and think, what if, and could you done more? But is there anything that stands out for you, maybe like mindset? I think a big thing for me was probably mindset. Just, I don't think I was like you, trying to find that consistency and put in internal pressure on myself, and I just couldn't deal with it at the time. So it was anything from you looking back now that sort of stood out, why others got it, others got that pro deal and carried on with Chelsea, and you maybe just fell short?
Yeah, I think really similar to you, Cavs. That just having that mindset of being able to do it regularly and consistently was something I just struggled to do. Some of the other boys at the time were just or seemed to be able to perform week in, week out, and overcome certain obstacles more effectively than I was. And that was some of it was down to the physical attributes they had, or the technical attributes that probably enabled them to showcase and in games how good they were. And I was probably in a position where I had to be on top of my game each and every game to have an impact on it. And whether or not that's, as you said, a little bit more mentally fatiguing, I suppose, that you have to be at your best every game to make an impact. So yeah, I certainly looked at players at the time and was like, wow, how do you like continue to do that each week? Where I was more up and down, and in performance and where I was with my mind, really. But yeah, very similar to you, mate. I think it's something that potentially at 17, 18, some people just haven't developed that ability to have a really robust mindset, really.
Yeah, definitely.
And some people have.
Definitely, mate. I think, like you said, everyone sort of mind physically as well as the mindset, because I was tiny up until literally the summer of me getting released, and then I shot up, and obviously now we're both 6 foot plus, well, 6'1". So it comes in all shapes and forms, and everyone sort of has their growth spurt and different times, and it's just if people are patient, and that's what I felt. I don't think I was given the patience I probably needed, because I was putting pressure internally on myself. I needed someone just to get a hold of me and be like, stop putting so much pressure on yourself. You're a good player. That sort of just to encourage me along. And yeah, that's probably, and like you, very similar, mate. Very, very similar. So on that, just obviously when you did get let go from Chelsea, how did that affect you, sort of your mental health, and did you fall out of love with football?
Yeah, I think it certainly had an impact on me, Cavs. Probably only when you're looking back now, you appreciate maybe how different you were for the period after. Maybe for 6 months after, I probably really struggled to come to terms with more the fact of just not going there every day. It's all I'd ever known. Yeah, it was challenging. As I said earlier, friends and family were amazing, really, and enabled me to have some consistency outside of football to help me get through that. I think I definitely had some, don't know the best way to frame it, but maybe some darker periods in those times. I never felt in a position where I was overly struggling. I was probably just really downbeat after a decision that was obviously affecting my future. But yeah, I think it is a tough period for all young footballers when they go through that. And as I keep saying, I was just really fortunate that I had a network that enabled me to get through that. And Chelsea were fantastic with me. And I can't speak highly enough of them in that situation, where they supported me through further education that I would need to then go on to university. So in terms of me having to pay for that was taken out, and they were able to do that for me. And then they just offered me a one day a week in the development centres to see whether or not I'd like coaching. I'd never thought about it until they'd asked me, to be honest. But yeah, as I say, that their treatment of me probably made that process as smooth as possible. Yeah, and I know a lot of other people have different experiences of that, and I think that's something that the game needs to be able to do a lot better in general, and hopefully take experiences like mine as something that can be replicated by many other clubs.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm glad you brought up that was going to be my next sort of question. How did they support you? And it sounds like you just said, I definitely didn't get that from the club I was at, and a lot of people don't. And obviously, I had my family and friends support, and that was sort of the big network for me. Where I sort of, because I did fall out of love with football at the time. The only thing that the club did do is recommend me to other clubs, and then I waited about 6 months and then went on for these trials. And even then, I remember looking back, my dad took me all the way up to Cardiff and Bristol City, and I played in these games. And I can remember now just not feeling part of it, not wanting to even go out on the pitch. My confidence was shattered so much. And those were probably the toughest, darkest times for me, that initial release period and getting through that. And again, like you, mate, that's what sort of led me into coaching. My dad was a scout at Charlton at the time, and I went down and then I started helping out at the development centre and was working for Charlton for a couple of years, just doing similar to what you were, mate. And that was my saving grace, if you like. And because at the time I didn't want to kick another ball. I did eventually, obviously, after the 8 months or something, go for these trials. And even then I remember getting offered something obviously, you know me as a centre midfielder, and I got offered something at right back, and I just didn't take it at a professional club. And it just wasn't for me at the time, and I wanted to go and just go back and enjoy football, and that's what led me to the non-league route, obviously. And then us playing together at Merstham, and just on that, mate, obviously then going into the non-league route, how did you find that? Obviously I know you've suffered from your injuries as well, over the seasons, and again, how did that sort of have effect on you mentally and physically, and your whole wanting to commit to football again?
Obviously we've known each other a fairly long time now, Cavs, and interesting listening to you say that in terms of when you were going to other clubs and almost not wanting to be there. I remember when Chelsea gave me the decision, and I had the opportunity to go to a couple of other clubs towards the end of that season, to try and give me the opportunity to start the season afresh, hopefully at a new club. And I remember going down there and almost, like, reflecting upon it now, I felt like a total zombie being there. Like I didn't. Every time I went to the training ground, all I wanted to do was get back to the digs I was staying at the time, so I could just chill out and not doing anything. So yeah, it definitely has probably a much bigger psychological impact on you than we potentially realised at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And as I said, and you were obviously in a much more unfortunate position than me, because you weren't given the support by the club that you were at. And as I said, the fact that Chelsea were able to give me that probably enabled me to come out of that period a lot quicker than other players do. But yeah, moving into non-league, really, I think I made the decision to go to university and kind of knock football on the head in terms of a potential career. And I was quite content with that, and probably one of the best decisions I think I ever made. It's certainly enabled me to have the dual careers I have at the moment, which I both thoroughly enjoy. But yeah, the non-league football, it's something that I'm so glad I ended up going into. A bit like you, Cavs, falling out of love is probably a good way to put it for the first year or so. And obviously, you know, I'm good mates with Brandon Daly, and he was the goalkeeper at Merstham at the time when they were still in the Ryman South. And yeah, he was pestering me for the entire year to come down to training. And in the end, I think I went down with only a few games to go. And Hayden being Hayden, chewed my ear off for probably the first half an hour about Chelsea to begin with. But
I remember when I first come to Merstham and he was like, Chelsea, we got this Chelsea player, we got this, and then I was like, he just loves his Chelsea, doesn't he? Anything Chelsea, and you're halfway there with him.
Literally, but it was look, as you say, it's my time at Merstham, and we were fortunate enough to play together at different times, Cavs. But it was something that I've thoroughly enjoyed and made some really good friends. Obviously, yourself being one, and Coops and Charlie and people like that is probably the biggest thing I've taken out of non-league football. But yeah, injuries have been a bit unfortunate. I've obviously got this glass shoulder that I've tried to have mended a couple of times, but hasn't quite worked out. But yeah, in terms of, I think the injuries were tough at different periods because they probably came at times where I felt I was making a little bit of progress and really started to enjoy playing again. And I think across the time at Merstham, we built some really good teams that probably underachieved massively when you look at the players that were involved. We had some great cup runs that you were certainly more involved in than me, Cavs. But as I say, if you look at the players, and I know you were able to do it in your final season when you finished second in the league, when it probably all came together finally. But yeah, I definitely take a lot of pride really in being part of those teams and making some great friends. And it certainly brought that love of football back to me, of being in a dressing room and being with proper people really. Thoroughly enjoyed being in the changing rooms and as I say, getting to know loads of people. So yeah, the injuries have impacted me probably a lot more than I hoped, but it's part and parcel of it.
And then just, I agree, mate, in terms of the social side and the friends. I think that's the biggest thing from football for me, is I've made so many friends from football, and you can't beat that in any job role, I don't think. And obviously it's just a bonus to go along and then get paid for it. Still something that we both love doing, do you know what I mean? And that leads me on to what, obviously growing up, just what did football mean to you? What did it mean to you as that youngster first signing for Chelsea and all the way till now, mate, really?
Yeah, it was everything really, and it's still, and at this point now we're probably appreciating how much football is a part of our lives because it's not in it at the moment and life feels very, very different. But yeah, it was everything really. And I suppose being at an academy when you're younger, that probably only intensifies because that's all you're even at school with some people, you're not necessarily known as just another person. You're known as the footballer that does this, and that comes with different pressures and stuff. But yeah, I think it's always meant a huge amount to me, and the fact that I'm fortunate enough to still be working in the game, both in a coaching role at the moment, which I'm sure we'll come on to, is a dream job for me, if I'm honest. Being able to work with some of the most talented young people in the country is fantastic. But then I think that, as I said a minute ago, that the non-league football has really brought that love of football back for me. And yeah, being able to play at Merstham I think I was there for about 4 years and probably only played about 40 games, but it certainly gave me back a love for football. And as I said, it's enabled me to still carry on playing in some aspect. I haven't done that this year, but it's certainly something I'll look to take up again moving forward, because one, from a fitness point of view, of course, but as we mentioned, that ability to be involved in a dressing room is just huge and brings so many more benefits. And I think people outside of the game, or even those that don't play regularly, probably don't appreciate as much. You're with each other for you play 46 games in non-league, and you spend a lot of time with each other. And I think it's something that's definitely underappreciated.
Yeah, definitely, Mal. I don't think I could have put it any better, to be honest. Just before we go into your coaching, because I'm going to ask you the same thing as a coach, but as a player, mate, and with the experience you've had, what advice would you give any sort of any young players now who have aspirations of obviously playing professional football or even playing the highest level of semi-professional football?
I think for me would just be to enjoy every single moment of it. I think the one massive frustration I have with people like ourselves, Cavs, when they speak about their own experiences, is that they look back on it, and you put it excellently earlier about having these massive regrets and should have done this and I should have done that. And look, we're in the back of our minds, we probably all think, oh, I could have done this differently, I could have done that differently. But I think just enjoying every single moment of the experience you have, if you're lucky enough to be at an academy as I was, then just try and take it all in. But then we've been really fortunate enough, the boys I'm working with at the moment have been joined on a few calls by some of the more senior players in the academy, and their message is, and it seems really simple, but I think it's the best message you can give to any young player, really, is just to try and work as hard as you possibly can, day in, day out. And we're fortunate enough to be joined by Mason Mount, and the boys were the other day, and he's a perfect example of that. And I think the way that he tried to transfer that over to the boys is a massive part of him becoming what he's become, and not just breaking into the first team, but playing over 40 games this season. The fact that he was able to just work as hard as he possibly could throughout his entire time at the club has been a big part of him becoming what he has. So yeah, and I think from my own experiences as well, that's the only piece of advice I try and give my boys at the moment in a broader sense, is just to enjoy it and work as hard as you possibly can, and try to listen to all the advice from the people that matter. Yeah,
brilliant, man. It, obviously, going on to that, you just touched on, so obviously you're working at Chelsea with the under-9s, and you've been there for a number of years now. And that's brilliant, mate, to be able to, well, Chelsea, one, it just goes back to the support they've given you since obviously your playing career finished with them, but then they gave you a role as a coach and has helped you with that. So it shows that you massively that you got so much support from them, which is brilliant. And it shows sort of what a top club it is. And then so then being able to call on them as a club, being given the first team players a duty to go and speak to the younger players and pass on, and that's brilliant, and that's priceless. You can't put something a price on that, and how relevant that is. But then just going on to you as a coach, mate, just without going in too deep, just sort of what as a coach, what advice would you give the young players again, but also just touch on like the 3 things you look for in a player, and then and any bit of advice as well with your coach's hat on.
I think coaching has been, as I said, the job I have at the moment, and how fortunate I am to be working with these group of players is brilliant, and something that I'm fully aware I'm really fortunate enough to do. And I think it's probably taken me up until this point I'm still definitely doing it, and will continue to develop as a coach. And I still feel very early on in the process. But I think in terms of the advice I try and give to the players, it wouldn't change dramatically from what we just spoke about. But in terms of, I think, especially at the age group we work with, we and Chelsea being the club that we are, we obviously are able to recruit a lot of the best talent within our area. But I think a huge part of what I see my role as is developing them as young kids. And of course, one of our main aims is to ensure that they develop as young footballers in their technical and tactical aspects. And that's something I'm always working on, to try and get my message across to them as clear as possible. But I think what we've really strived to do in the last however many years, and probably long before I started as a coach, was develop them as young kids, so that they're well rounded. When we go away, and we're fortunate enough to go abroad on tours or national tours, that when they interact with different people, that they're able to do that in a really respectful and polite manner. And I think that's a huge part of what I do. And I certainly think that we have a role to challenge the boys as well, and push them outside their comfort zone when and where we can to try and test them. But yeah, in terms of potentially what we look for in players, it's definitely that rounded package, from a football perspective. Again, just someone that is able to come into training and work their socks off each and every day. And obviously the game is certainly moving in a way where players have got to be in a position where they can cover the pitch and be really mobile. But then we've also got, at that age group, you've got so many different characteristics physically, that you've got some players that their intelligence on the ball is fantastic as well. So it's about just trying to develop their areas of development, but also really try and bring out their strengths as well, because they all have them, because that's the reason that they're fortunate enough to be at an academy like Chelsea. So yeah, I just think in terms of the what is the biggest thing for me is just being able to, that whole package of making sure that they're fantastic footballers, of course, and keep developing, but really great young people that go on to represent the club really well.
That's something, yeah, mate, that's spot on. And that's something that we try and do at KNR in terms, it's a great saying, and I might say it wrong. It's just, they're a person first and they're a footballer second. And that's what you want to try and develop before the footballer can develop. They got to have certain, like you said, grounding and characteristics as a person first. And that just comes down to listening and being respectful and little things like that. So no, that's spot on, mate. And then, do you have any, this might be interesting, do you have any non-negotiables as a coach?
Well, that is a good question. Lateness
even to put on yourself, like something that you always ask for from yourself.
No, it's definitely a good question. Lateness is something I've always been touchy about. We've obviously got with the age group we work in, we've obviously got to be a bit lenient because parents are travelling from all over the place. But we try and put a big premium on that with the boys when we're away, when it's completely within their control. And yeah, I think in terms of even going back to my last point about making sure that I'm always representing myself in a really positive manner in terms of integrity and respect for the boys, for the parents. And I think that's something that is definitely a non-negotiable when we are trying to ensure that the boys behave like that as well. The boys will make many mistakes in a footballing aspect, and that's my role as a coach to try and help them develop those. And they will make, as young people, they will make mistakes in terms of how they behave at different times. But I think that's what I try to probably implement, is that you become a little bit more firmer on the discipline around that, because it's something that they need to get right, and they should be behaving in a way that is really respectful and is representing themselves and the club and their families in a really positive manner.
Oh, mate, that's spot on. And I think, knowing you, obviously, I think Chelsea has rubbed off on you, because knowing you for as long as I have, you're that person, you're respectful. And I think that obviously you pervade that through your coaching, but also that's just you as a person. And I think obviously you going back to how Chelsea and you are now trying to develop those kids, I think that you probably had that when you were first as a youngster at Chelsea. It's probably grown a lot more now, and more emphasis is on it nowadays. But without you knowing, because that's how I definitely, if someone was to say for me to describe you, I definitely use those words: respectful and well mannered, and I think that passes on.
Nice,
but mate, brilliant.
Thank you.
No. But no, brilliant. Loved all that, and there's loads of little golden nuggets in there for anyone watching this. So Just going to
Perfect.
end with a quick fire round, mate. So obviously you
Yep.
touched on in terms of your playing career, and I see a picture up that I'll definitely put on this video the other day with you with I think it was like Loftus Cheek and players like that in a lake, it looked like. So
Yeah.
I'll try and find that. So I know you've played with some top players, and before you go for that quick fire, I saw something on Twitter the other day about players, like list some players that you wish you would have had more time with. And I think in terms of me, mate, I'd definitely say your name's for me up there, because I only saw glimpses of what you could do. Because like you said, when I come to Mersham, I think you had left and then come back again, or was injured, sorry, and then come back again, and then it took you a while to get back to your form. And then when you did, and then you had another shoulder injury, and it was disappointing for me, because obviously playing as the holding midfielder, you were playing as the 8 and the 10 then, and it was lovely to play with you, mate, and learnt a lot from you, even playing at that whatever age I was, quite old then. So no, you're definitely someone who I wish I had more time to play with, and even played with you at a younger age for myself, and obviously when you were younger as well, because I think it would have been brilliant.
Likewise, mate, definitely.
So right, let's get on to this quick fire, mate, just to finish. So best player that you've played with and against?
Best player I played with would be Nathan Aki. For loads of different reasons. He just probably certainly in terms of obviously his playing ability, played so many Premier League appearances and is a Dutch international, but as a package, he is the most humble person you could ever come across. And against, in terms of a one-off game, when I was playing in the youth team, would probably be Adnan Januzaj at Man United. He was unbelievable in that one game. I haven't probably come up against a talent like that before, and he was unbelievable.
Decent. And best ground you've played at?
I've been asked this before when someone stitched me up to university students, and I always feel so ridiculous in saying this, because if anyone ever watched the game, I was probably on for about 90 seconds, and I probably touched the ball at the very last kick of the game. But Old Trafford, I think it was the FA Youth Cup semi-final back in 2012, but saying that I played on it is in the loosest sense of the term possible.
Listen, they all count. They all count.
Exactly.
You're the best side that you've played in, and why? And so what made it special?
In terms of my younger days, again, probably that team that won the Youth Cup. I didn't play loads of minutes in that run, but people like Nathan Aki and Nathaniel Chaloba, John Swift, Lewis Baker. I'm probably missing out a few here, but really top people, as well as fantastic players that are all obviously playing professionally now at a really, really high level. But I think, and I touched upon it earlier, moving into probably the more, when I've been playing senior football, the team that I'm just trying to think which year it was, the team that I was able to play at Merstham with yourself, Cavs, and obviously we had Charlie playing as a centre forward, and Charlie's obviously had his injury issues as well. But when he was playing, the amount of goals he'd score for us, and Koscielny and Coops and people like that, and Tutu, was a great team. It was great to see you boys, what we last season kick on and obviously reach the heights that you're able to do. So that's definitely in terms of the best team I played at senior level for loads of different reasons. And I know my old mate Walter Figuera came in to help you score a few goals towards the end of the season.
Oh, mate, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Yeah. Obviously, coming in to replace Charlie as Charlie got injured, it was big boots to fill.
Of course, yeah.
Charlie was unbelievable for us, and even the FA Cup, obviously, even scoring in Ebbsfleet to get us to Oxford, and then not being able to. It was
heartbreaking.
It was
for him,
it was harsh. It was harsh, and again, we talk about the mental side of it. How he would have had to deal with that. I can imagine. There's not many big games like that I've missed out on. So I couldn't really comment, but Yeah, Walter, and he was brilliant.
Yeah.
I might get you in a bit of trouble here, but best manager you've ever had? If you say
you might,
who we both know, I'm going to be disappointed.
I've been in terms of incredibly fortunate enough to work with coaches that are now obviously applying their trade at the top level. Adi Vivash was my under 16 and under 18 coach, and he is now working at Coventry, and had a massive impact on me as a player and a person. And then also Joe Edwards is obviously now working under Frank in the first team, and Joe's was obviously a really young coach when I was working with him, and I think I first worked with him when I was 9 or 10 years of age, and to see how he's developed into certainly one of the best coaches in this country is definitely inspiring for someone like probably both of us, Cavs, really, to see a coach like that, and being able to have conversations with him now and in the last few years has been invaluable, really. And he's a fantastic coach, and someone that has certainly had a big impact on me when I was younger, but also as the coach I am now. And yeah, I suppose I've really only had one mainstay coach manager at non-league level, so Haid, I'll give you a shout out as someone definitely is in all seriousness worked under Haid obviously for a long time, and yeah, certainly enabled me to get my love of football back, and yeah, hopefully one day we might even be able to work together again and play a few more games alongside each other, Cavs. You never know. Although I remember the one time we did play us with each other in a pre-season friendly at Whiteleaf, I think we were 3-0 down at half time. In some probably more choice words that I use, he said, "You two playing together again."
Yeah, that was one of those pre-season games. You just thought, "Oh my god, what am I doing?" Yeah, that was change of shape though. I'll blame that. A change of shape, unworked shape. That was. But listen, that's just got you a deal for next season. So see you next season anyway. And last bit, mate. If there's just a bit of advice like we talk about golden nuggets, a golden nugget you took from someone or a manager or a coach that you've worked with that's giving you an invaluable bit of advice, and you've held on to it and applied it into obviously when you carried on playing or even in your coaching or both.
Yeah, I think probably around the time when I was debating where to go with things after getting released, was really fortunate enough to have regular conversations with people like Adi and Neil Bath, the head of academy, and Joe Edwards at the time. And I think the one piece of advice that I always remember from that period was them encouraging me to stay true to myself, and try and make decisions that I felt was right for me. And at the time, the easiest decision for me would probably have been to try and give football a go, because that's what 99% of people in my position, especially coming from an academy like Chelsea, would continue to try and do. But I suppose they probably saw something in me that I might be able to be a bit more of a success outside of football and doing something else. So they really encouraged me to think long and hard about those decisions and stay true to me, despite what other people might say. As you can imagine, loads of people in and around me were, well, why aren't you playing football anymore? Why aren't you doing this? But probably one of the most timely pieces of advice, and as I said before, fortunate enough to have a mum and dad and younger brother at the time that were just incredibly supportive of whatever decision I made. So yeah, just probably that, Cavs, really, to stay true to myself and make decisions that you think are right for yourself, and not to be influenced by people that might not have your best interests at heart.
Brilliant, mate. Loved it. Great catching up, and like I said, invaluable messages and key messages from yourself for the people watching this. So yeah, mate, brilliant. Thanks very much for taking the time.
No, absolute pleasure, mate. Really appreciate you inviting me on, and as I said, hopefully people take some little bits away. And as you said, just fantastic to catch up, mate, and definitely have to keep in contact more regularly.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Well, yeah, wish you all the best, and obviously we'll see each other and speak soon.
Top man. Cheers, Cavs.
Cheers, mate.